Well, today we're looking at how to use a grid builder and how to use it really, really well. So I've prepared a presentation and I just need to get ready to where we're using it. So let's see, I have a mouse, but somehow it is not appearing on my screen. There we go. Ooh, now I got it. Okay, so what I'm doing here. Okay, so today we're looking at how to use Grid Builder and how you can use it in your designs. And I'm really excited to show you that. So I'm excited to go through a couple of topics, and these are the talking points that I've selected. So grids explained how, like, why did we create them? What's inside? Like, what are you getting when you're buying them? And then finally, how to build a great composition by using our grids. So these are pretty much the topics that we're talking about. So, and I'm going to be using especially two methods, showing you guys two methods of how I use them and how you can use them in your design, in your elements. So of course, if you're rewatching this video, you're gonna probably not want to watch through all the stream. So what we're gonna do, or what we're about to do at the end of the stream, is that we're gonna write out the timestamps and put them into the description. So if you're just rewatching it right now, you'll find all the timestamps in the description, and of course the links for the video or for the tools itself in the descriptions. So let's get started with the grids explained. So what are the grids, and how, like, why have we actually created them? So it really all started with a simple problem that I've had, and it's coming up with new composition. I'm teaching a course, a workshop on composition masterclass, and in that composition masterclass, I'm explaining like one way of coming up, like a whole process, the 4-step process of creating a composition. So it goes through thumbnailing, then sketching, finally adding some like the finalizing the sketch, and finally also just the finalization of the piece, right? So those are the 4 steps that I go through every single composition to make them and create them. And in the thumbnailing part, that's where we actually use grids. So I kind of break down a composition always in shapes and use that to help myself draw some letters inside. One tool that I've created for myself is actually to simplify that. So for example, rainy days when I do not know how to or what to create, I have pre-composed grids. That's where I started off with products, is creating pre-composed grids. And so let's have a look. I need to switch the cameras and turn this here off, put this back, and then turn this on here so you guys can see. So here in these, I have, for example, like a grid, composition grids here, for example. And so I can just tap on here and you'll see there's a finished grid. And so that's just where you have to fill out those words. For example, I can like now go in here, get another brush like my sketch brush, and then write something in depending on the word. For example, nothing. I have no idea what I'm writing in here, but you see these lines help me to kind of figure out where I want to write something in. Nothing seems kind of like this. Maybe I had to change that around, but you see it's pretty easy to suddenly create a awesome composition if you have boxes already ready for you just to fill out, and you use kind of like the outlines to set nothing seems possible over here. So possible, kind of like that. Of course, you could have done that better, but imagine we're putting in a banner inside here. That could work until it's done. Until something like this. Who knows? Like that. And then if I hide the grid, for example, here, now I can add in the banner that would kind of like make this whole thing pop. And you see, this is how I started off, like creating these already pre-composed grids, pre-composed pieces. And out of that came then the idea of, you know what, let's create individual grids so you guys can start creating them yourself. So if I go into the other piece, we'll see at the grid. So we created these boxes that you can individually find, and we got 35 different ones that you can use. So here, this one is kind of like this slanted up. So here I have those, the rise here. And so here is really what you get. So it's a box that has different shapes. It has top and bottom anchor points, center anchor points, so you can kind of like structure that. So this line right here will help you to actually find the center of a piece to kind of like put them into place. And then you have all these boxes like limited, so you can also see that you have a straight line. Let's see if I get a straight line here. So if I wanted to write something out, getting a black color, like for example, I want to write out the letter B, I can just do that. I can draw the letter C, and I always know exactly that it's vertically straight and even spaced correctly. So these are also really great to have a great space. So if I know that the word starts with a C and kind of like an R here, and I can just help myself with these lines. Then we have the X height or the crossbar here at the center of the grid, and then finally the bottom line and the top line, who are actually just a way to help you see where the letter should start and where it should end. So I've seen a lot of people kind of like use this just as a guideline and then writing it out like this, but like really use the space completely. Like go from top, use this space here to draw straight lines and to fill it out to create those beautiful letters. And use also just these guidelines, like here the crossbar, you can change that, you can customize that, and I'm going to show you how you can customize this grid at the end of the video as well. So this is what we've made these pieces so you guys can create to help yourself draw composition easier, to create your own composition. Again, kind of like we looked at just before, these tools here that you can create your own sets of pieces of thumbnails that you can create and then use in your composition. So we've used them in a lot of our pieces, and they're basically two methods that we use. But before we're gonna jump in that, just gonna wait till my camera goes back on, we are going to look at what's inside. So what is inside? What are you getting when you're buying the grid builder? So one of the things that you will get when you buy the grid builder is you will get a download link that will allow you to download. So this is the easiest way to download it is through Safari. And then a lot of people get confused because when Safari downloads it, you'll get a link and then it will just jump up here. So if I go to Safari, let's see here. So if I have the download link, it will just download something here and a download bar would appear up here in this download link. You'll find that under stefankunz.com/support. You'll find exactly explain how that works. That will save it to files. And what you'll get here is if you go to downloads, you'll get a zip file that will appear like this. And then you can just tap on that. It will create a folder. That's a builder bundle or the grid builder, and you'll find here all these different folders that are useful for you. So you don't only get Procreate files, but you also get Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, Adobe Sketch, Affinity Designer, Autodesk Sketchbook Pro. You even get a font where you can use it and type it in. You get the individual files, for example, PNGs, PDFs, and all that, which you can drag and drop, and even Keynote or PowerPoint, like all these different applications that you can also use them. So it's really useful, even not just Procreate. We've designed it especially with Procreate in mind because we use it all the time. You get also here a explanation of how to use it. So you see method 1 is explained right here, and then method 2 is where you go from scratch. I'm going to explain just the other way around, but that's basically that. Then you see also the installation guide explained here. This one is a little bit more complicated than it actually is now, thanks to files. And here you get 35 brushes. So we got all these arc large, arc small brushes, banner, block, bow tie, bridge, bridge left, bridge right, circle, coffin. You see all of these names that are not necessarily interesting, but you see now the question is, how do you import so many different brushes in one go? So what I will do is actually I will open Procreate on the side, then I will tap select all, and then hold on, drag it up, and you'll see all these files will combine. You see that number over here that says 35. You drag it in and boom, it will do import. And now this is also a part that is a little bit confusing. It says imported, but you do not see where it is. So what you can do is then you go and you open the brush panel and you automatically see all the new brushes that has been imported right into your imported brush folder. Now, if in case you want to get a separate folder, the trick is actually to rename this folder here, to just add a 1 at the end. It will change that. And then just do that again, drag it in, do the import. It will create a new import folder. So you can do that even with other brushes, but it will create a new import folder. In here, you got all these 35 grid builder brushes that you can now rename into grid builder. And you got a separate folder with all your brushes in here. And since I've already have that, I can just delete, because I already have them inside here, up here somewhere. And where do I have them? I know I have them here, Grid Builder, there we go. So this is the easiest way to actually download it, to find it, and that's how you can do that very easily. So this is what you get. You get 35 individual brushes from the flowing ribbon, flag, dipper, diamond, all these different shapes that will be available to you to use in your composition. Of course, you can kind of tweak them around and use them, and that will lead us into the next point, which is, well, the download and install that I already explained, but how do I use it in a composition? So how to build a composition using Grid Builder. So there are two methods, like I explained, and method number one is the Tetris method. So let me just show you that here. This is building it up from scratch, and which is called the Tetris method. So method number one, building it up from scratch, and let's have a look at how that works. So I have an example here from scratch where you actually take one shape and you start using that one shape, and then you start adding another shape that like fits right into this one. So here I've already prepared a couple of them. And so I kind of like use another shape and then try to, again, with the center anchor points, make sure that these are all aligned and on the center here. Another way you can do that is just by adding a center line, drawing that in. So here I'll draw a center line, maybe not as thick. Reduce that a little bit, tiny little bit there, make it straight, and then here can just align that. And so that will help me to see if this is all on the right line. So here we have a little arc, so it's a little different shape than the one before. So again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to play Tetris, so we're trying to find a shape that will fit as close as possible using the space here really nicely. I could, if I inverted that one over here, so kind of like the same shape, but kind of like use this, you'll see this wouldn't be a great way to play Tetris because you have all that space inside here that is just too big. So you want to use that space well. So I'm going to delete this. And so one shape that really fits in well is this one here, for example. So that's a, what did we call that grid here? It's just so you guys have a name or reference, the coffin. So that's the coffin. Then I add the next one, which is kind of like a arc at the bottom. And then finally on top here, another similar like this one here at the top, another layer that I can see added at the top. So finally that asks us the question, okay, what can I actually start writing inside? So I took the liberty of playing around with words and just trying to fit anything that would work in here really well. So I have learned nothing from binging Netflix. And you can see even here, I kind of played around, like I've split that one up into two parts. So these lines, again, these vertical lines help me to figure out the right inclination of every letter. Even the spacing helps me to just make sure that the letters are pretty much spaced in the correct way, kind of like I did as well here. And here, the middle line helps me just to make sure that I get the X height of all the letters. Of course, you're free to move around, again, to go out, especially when you're using cursive letters. But basically what it really helps you to do is to really to create a composition that is a little bit more interesting than just to make them float on top of each other, keep them square, and just like adding some touches. For example, here in this one here, the nothing, would have been really cool to have the Netflix in here because I can just change it around. But I can, again, let's see, I can create another piece of lettering in here. I'll go with the paintbrush and I'll write, for example, composition. Let's see, I don't know how many letters composition has, but I feel like it has a lot, so I'm gonna write it really tight. And as you can see, I was almost right here, so I'm just gonna squeeze that back in. But as we are still drawing in a draft version, this is where I'm just using the draft to do that composition. Now, composition, actually, you know what? I'm starting off with the wrong word. Mastering composition. So mastering. There we go. Composition. Same problem as before, as you can see. Here, I can either squish it together or I can just move it a tiny little bit more to the center. That's totally fine. Mastering composition. And then you see I have, like, since this would be the biggest word, kind of want that to be the most important word. So this is where you can change it as well. Like you can just say like is, or you can add, like you can move those around saying I want to change the order, for example, this, here, this, and this. I'll move these down and like I'll add like a smaller word in here like is. So I know that later on I can add like another box is easier. Then you something like that. So mastering composition is easier than you think. And let's see how that looks alone. Oh, now I wrote that into the wrong layer, this one here. But you see, this is how you start a composition. You place around. So let's see if I can just go ahead and play around. So what I do is really, again, just playing Tetris. So I, for example, start with the rise. The rise is actually not the best way to start, but we're not shy of a challenge. So I'm asking myself, like, what fits really well on this side? So I go back in my brushes and I look at all these elements. So I see here there's a bridge to the left. Let's see if I can find something else. For example, a wedge to the right. So here, actually what I like to do is to put those into new layers. So when I click that on, I can turn them around, scale them back and forth. Sometimes when you start out, so for example, I want to use that space really well over here. And I want to kind of like use the same element here, but spin it around, put that, align that to the end, kind of like the other one, just to the side, just like this. And so I start adding all these elements and try to come up with them. So here as well, you can change the size of the individual grids. So for example, if you start out and you click that and you see like it's overlapping on your grid size, then you just reduce the shape, the size of the shape, and you can even make it really small, really big, however you want. And so you see now I can start adding all these different elements. And you can also start with a quote. For example, if you know, let's see, one of the quotes that I want to write out is, for example, let's write it out just in a short sentence here. Coffee is really all I need. So coffee is really all I need. So I see like I have one box that is long, one box that is short, another box that is relatively long, shorter one, very short, and quite okay. So I can start off with the very first grid again. So let's go in here to the grids. I'm always losing where I've put the grid builder. Here we go. So let me start off with a small arc in a brand new layer. So like this. So coffee and then small word. So let's box that into a, let's see, diamond shape, or even this one, the pill. The pill works perfectly. So again, new layer here. And you can see it's already perfect. It's in the middle. So I'm just going to center that on here and then just place it. Maybe I'll have to do that bigger, but now really all I need. So really, again, using the space as best as I can. I'm going to go with either a bow tie, for example. So like this, that's perfect. Not too big. And now I can just fit that in just like that. Really all I need. So all I can maybe, let's see, I can either use another pill. So kind of like go with this one here, duplicating that. So that's also very nice. And I can place like all I in that as well. And then need will actually duplicate the same as coffee, place that down. And so here you're kind of playing, again, it's the Tetris method. So you're playing Tetris by using up all the space as best as you can. And then finally you try it out by simply filling it out using a sketch brush or any brush you like. And then just making sure, okay, so coffee has 6 letters. So I'm just gonna use the space as best as I can. So right now I just wanna make sure that the style I want to use is okay. So here we go. And then finally here is really, so here I could even think of, you know, what about writing this out here really? So this is, the problem here is that when you do that, when you start playing around with other shape, but that's more of a composition issue, is that you have like these letters. So that kind of prompts me to play around and get a little bit more flexible with the composition. Place that in the middle here, and then I'll know that kind of like, all right, here in the between, I can write down all I, and then finally get in here, use this, and then place that. And so that's kind of like just to help me see, did I get it correct? And let's get just that. So I kind of like this. And see if I can do the other version, which is, but I could also, again, go back, getting this in here. I'll duplicate that just to show what I mean. Which is here. I'll start in by writing really. All, oh, there we go. So all I need. So that's also a way, and then I can start thinking about like the shapes of the letters. Like, do I want to make it round? Do I want to change kind of the size of the letters? But again, for the composition wise, and now it also helped me to get those shapes in right and kind of like fill it out. So this is kind of like the start where you start from scratch and how you can do that very easily. So let's look at the next method, which is the method number 2, and which is more of finalizing. So here we go. Method number 2, how to finalize a piece using the grid builder, and it's kind of like the perfection method. So you're using the grids to perfect your composition. So in this case, I have actually taken the liberty of taking a sketch of mine. And so here we go. We already have like, I've created the composition. I know kind of like how I want it to be done. And in this case, I've already finished this piece, and I want to show you how I've actually created this. So let's see, let's open this up here, go to the album, and you can see what I've done is I've created this piece here. I've kind of like taken the opacity in the background and created a grid on top of that. And you see like my letters are not all straight, so I had to address that. I had to change kind of like the spacing as well, and even change kind of the orientation of all these different pieces. So in the next one, I started to like write it out, kind of like just sketching out the inlines, just making sure that the spacing is correct, that the letter shapes are correct. And as soon as I had that done, I finalized the piece by actually writing it out, giving the letters weight, structure, and shape. And so that's kind of where it finalized. And then finally, the piece that we have over here, which is, could be any one of those. But you see, that's where the structure, like the shapes of those arcs up here, the lines here are straight and consistent, which is why this is such a great tool to finalize your lettering as well. And so that helped me to gain like consistency over all the letters and just to create a great structure. So this is the next method that we looked at. So here we would start at actually reducing the layer, like the layer opacity, adding a new layer, and then starting to find the right grids for these shapes. So here we go, I've used the arc. I'm just using a different color. So now this looks a little bit big. So we'll reduce the shape. And so I see like, oh, this part of the lower arc is pretty much the better version of it. So I'm gonna place this somewhere there and kind of in the center. And then I can erase some of these parts. So this is where you start tweaking around your grids, making sure that they're the best version, that they fit in really nicely, and so on and so on. And then you get all these right shapes that you need, like for example, now the block. And I'm just gonna make sure that the page orientation is correct. So here you can see I'll place in the block, I'll zoom in, and again, make sure that it is straight, centered, again, centering all your pieces. If you have a centered composition, this is a great tool to place that in, and so on. And then you just go in, you fill it out, kind of like I just showed you before. So this version here where you create the whole composition, place all the grids in the right place. And so you can move on to the next part, which is then start sketching it out, making sure that it's all correctly placed. If you need to make some adjustments, then yes. And again, just making sure that everything stays in line. Like the space between the letters, you need to make them between the boxes. And then you can really go with the line of the letter really to the end, making sure that it's straight, that your O's or your circles are just going over a tiny little bit to make it easy, to make it useful. So this is the second method, which is the finalizing method. Now, finally, one of the things that you can do is customizing your grids. So there are little tuning that you can do, and I love to look at that in a way of how you would tune a car or like anything. Like you want to make it perfect for yourself. So I already showed you a tiny little bit by just erasing some parts using the top, the bottom part. But what you can also do, and it might seem obvious, of course, but for example, if you're drawing a script letter, I usually like to draw a script letter by actually giving it a tiny little slant. So I can use the transform tool. So if you go to free transform or freeform, you can just select the top layer and then just move it around, slant it in the perfect position that you want it to. So here we go, I like this. And then you can also change the axis of the X height. So that means this line here, one of the ways that I like to transform that is to actually just select here, and I'll go up here, try to just select this tiny little element here, and then move it up. For example, if I want to have like a super high condensed letter, I'll move it up, and then I can start sketching in a word, which is kind of like what I did before. So I'll go back to the paintbrush. I kind of like this brush right now to sketch out. So here, like an A going up here into a R. And then you see, you can always try to get like these same bows and arrows and kind of like get this nice consistent flow of letters. Like I haven't written anything, but let's write something inside here. For example, this is great. So of course we do not have a descender. We have a little bit of an ascender, but not a descender. And so one thing that I also like to do sometimes is actually, like, I know that my E should fit in nicely in here. So I'll draw it out and then make sure that it fits. The A kind of like similar, like to draw that out here. And then I can just use these, place them again together, and then get the spacing right afterwards, without actually having to worry too much about making sure that the spacing works, but get the spacing, the width of the letters consistent. So this is great. And then on top here, I can start to add like a nice flourish, or just ligature there, and just play around then with the thickness. So that's kind of like the next step that I will do, is kind of like play with the thickness and make sure that I get that consistent as well, in a consistent way. So just keep playing around until you're satisfied and you feel like, oh, this is nice. Maybe you'll have to move things together again, move them like apart, and just playing around with it. That's kind of like the whole game, but that goes into lettering, and that is nothing that has to do with the grid builder, but this is kind of like how you can tweak the grid builder, move those pieces around, play around with them as much as you need to, just to get the nice letters inside. All right, so these are the 3 things. So again, you can start from scratch by playing the Tetris method that we played in here. So coffee is really nice, where you just try to find the right pieces that will fit in here. And there are a lot of different options, and you can play around, and then you can create all these different elements and pieces. The more you play around with, the more options you will have at the end of the time, and you'll learn a lot from that. So up next is a round of questions where you guys get to ask all your questions, which I now can go over in the Q&A section. So ask your questions in the comments or in the live chat if you want to, and I'd love nothing more than to help you out, figure out, go into details in depth of what you need to know. So I'm gonna let you guys ask those questions, and hopefully we can answer all of them, or perhaps I've actually already answered them all, which I hope that I have. And let's see if this is going on. So let's go into the question section. If you have any questions, let me know. I would love nothing more than to help you out with these. And for the meantime, I'm just gonna jump back to this section here and keep on drawing on this one, because the coffee is really all I need. It's not true, but all I need is a little coffee. Finding a really good quote. So let's see what you guys are writing in the comments. So good. So Jonathan Jenkins is asking, will you come up with more banner options? And the answer is absolutely. We're working on it. It's something that we've been working on for a while now, but we'll definitely work on something on this side. Alan Alorcan Vera, I'm not sure I can read your questions right. Hopefully you can kind of like rephrase that and I can help you with that. Why don't you do those colorful paintbrush pieces anymore? The ones you that are early on your Instagram. So if you are referring to these colorful pieces, I like to switch it up all the time. So let's see if I can jump back to an early piece that I've done. They're actually not that difficult to make, but they're fun to do. They look usually pretty cool and amazing. I'm just having a hard time to find them. But kind of like something like this over here is what they're referring to. Probably this one. This one is probably my most famous one for, but let's see if you have that. How would you use the letter builder with the grid builder to make it fit well? Great question. All right, Janet. So let's jump over into the file that I've been using over here and using the letter builder inside the grid builder. So there are different options. Let's jump over here. So if you have, for example, a grid like this one, the arc, and then you add like the letter builder. So let's put that into a different color. Choose here, letter builder. Now I just got to reduce the size. So we'll spread it out a tiny little bit. So there are different ways to fit it in really well. So one way is to actually, I need to move that out, is to get it inside here. Let's see if I can just place it in here, just because I've added too many letters. Kind of like that. And then you can use the warp function. The warp function is a little bit difficult to use because it's just annoying to kind of place around, but it works actually really, really well. So you're trying to, again, use those straight lines that you have and then placing it around and see, all right, I need to move all of these. And so it takes a lot of going back and forth, making sure that everything is almost perfect, that it works really well. Kind of like that, right? And so you play around until you're satisfied, but it is absolutely doable. It takes a little bit of patience, but you can see already I'm feeling very confident with how this looks, and already feel like I could start. Like the final adjustments, like those tiny little adjustments, can be done afterwards. So now if I wanted to write in a word, again, going with the paintbrush here, so I could write, how many letters do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 letters. What does question has? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, it has one too many. I do not know, but here you can see, I'm just gonna start writing out brave into the arc here. And you can see, like, the cool thing about that is now you can start writing in. Of course, you could have done that for the entire grid, but that's a beautiful thing, is that you can just plant that in here. But using the, what is it called? The warp tool, that's how you can really implement that easily into your design and really make it fit any shape. So playing around with the warp tool is probably the best way you can make it fit. And then again, if we take that out, it looks already really well done, and now it just needs some tiny little touches, maybe a tiny little bit of moving, like that's called the spacing. It's not called spacing, it's called, man, I've lost all the words for that, to place around in between letters. But this is pretty much the best and easiest way to do that. So let's see, do we have more questions? Ooh, we got a lot more questions in the meantime. Trying to see, there we go. So Alan Khan, okay, how you make, see if I can find that question again. How you make when the words are bigger than the grid boxes. So if the words are bigger than the grid boxes, you can just duplicate. So if, for example, if you have a super long word and you want to keep it small or change the height of the word, you can just like increase those boxes. Like you can move that in, say, for example, if we have a long word, like sometimes I'll use that. I can also stretch it. I can move that around. Again, you're super flexible in how you use that, but you can play around. You can move these kind of like this. Like these boxes are made to be played around with and just tweaked and later. Like I can even create a 3D version, like a Star Wars version by, for example, just by like tweaking this. Like if I keep the magnetic piece on here, I can just tweak these around and kind of like make it look like it's leaning into something. And so that's kind of the Star Wars effect, in my opinion, that can look really cool. And thanks to those vertical lines, you kind of know what direction you need to keep that on. So Pepis Duque is asking for a letter builder tutorial. Well, I got one already. So you go to my playlist, and this video will also be in that playlist, but you go to the playlist for letter builder or grid builder, like builder bundle tutorials. You'll find that there. There's a whole tutorial on how to use grid builder. And the cool thing is I got a mustache in that video too. Melinda's asking, how can you set up the grid for the number of letters you need? So here you'll never get the exact number for how many letters you need. What you could do for other shapes than just those complicated shapes, for example, like this one here, you could just duplicate this and then kind of like make that further up. But you can also just, again, like then combine that, merge them together, and then kind of like tweak them around. All these things like tweaking around, that's kind of like the best lesson that I can give you, is to play around with those boxes. But that's how you can make it fit all the numbers of letters, but also get creative by, for example, saying like either like perhaps it's perhaps instead of duplicating this, you can just erase like half of it, so you get all the letter numbers you need. For example, if you have a 7-letter word, then just use 7 of those boxes and then kind of like create the space in between. So it's all about creativity and kind of playing around, like extend the thing. For example, if you have the arc, somehow my layers are not showing again. Okay, so here we have the arc. So let me reduce the size a tiny little bit. But if I change the rotation here, duplicate that, and then change the rotation back, I can kind of like find an angle where these will fit together. And I feel like I'm not finding it right now, but we're almost there, almost too far. So kind of like this. So you see, you can kind of like extend the version by just flipping around, turning around, and finding new ways to do that. Letter builder, grid builder, and composition grids. How to all these come together. So again, if you looked at before how I explained how to place them together, it's kind of like this way of finding all these elements, how you place them into the arc, into the bow, by using the warp function, which is probably the easiest way to do that. How to use the grid builder with Illustrator? Well, that's a great question. I am not the best person to explain that to you because I rarely use Illustrator, but we have some people that have been using Illustrator for a really long time. And I've played around with Illustrator once. I've created like a letter, and it's really fun to use the letter builder inside there, but grid builder as well. Like, again, just think of it like this, like another way, kind of like I showed you before. And that's, I know that you can do that in Illustrator. So if I take files over here, and imagine this would be Illustrator. So I'll go not in the Procreate folder, but for example, the individual images, PNG, and like you have the brushes, of course, but I can just drag and drop and then place these around, like move them around. And I can do the same thing in Keynote. For example, I could create a keynote here. See, like create a plus, set a presentation, and then kind of like delete all of these elements. Kind of like do not need all of these. Whoops. And then again, try to get, whoops, let's see. Can I get files in here? Yes. So here we go, we got files. And I can introduce that, can move that around. Not as well as kind of like you can do in Photoshop or Procreate. Like, but I can move it around and transform it, place it around. See, I got a lot more trouble doing that with this one. But yes, this is pretty much how you could do it also in Illustrator. Hopefully that makes sense. So Eric Payne is asking the same thing for Photoshop. Again, helps when you're doing it, like when you're using the basic principles that I showed you in Procreate. That's the best that I can do, since I really mostly only use Procreate when I create things. That's why I can really explain it well in Procreate. But again, it is usable in Photoshop but I'm probably not the best one to explain that to you. How would you use the grid builder to create twisted text? So that is a little bit more complicated. So we're getting out of composition, but more into like text effects. And so you can use a grid or like a thing kind of like this. The flag would probably be the easiest one to use. And then it will go, why did I do this? Did I remove? So if I would show tap here plus, so I could kind of move this around freeform, like try to get this effect somehow where you can get a twist. But again, this is a lot trickier than doing this kind of like the opposite way around. So I'm not even sure how to do this or explain this right now, but I use, when I do the twisted trick, you can just rewatch the whole video on the twist because that uses a different shape and that's more of a text effect than composition. And so this tool is really designed to help you create amazing composition, less of like text effects. Do you ever find it difficult to remember all the different grids and fonts to do when you're on paper? So that is a little bit loaded question and a little bit difficult to explain. But the short answer is, like, I know kind of like the shapes that I want. Like if I draw on paper, if I start sketching out something, it will kind of look like this, where I just like copy, like either I create those shapes, and sometimes like those shapes that I know are in the grid builder are helpful to create those elements, but I can easily create these pieces where I've played Tetris with myself here. So kind of like that. And then I know like, oh, you know what? I could also do something like this. Place around like a letterbox text layer here, kind of like twist these around. And then you see, like this is kind of like how I would create like elements, like trying to do like symmetry and all these elements in here and get the best look that I possibly can. So I hope that this actually helped you to do so. Let's see if I have anything else. Yes. So now it's your turn. So it's your turn to start creating, and I hope that this video helped you to learn all these new steps. Again, remember that the tools are designed to help you. You should not be confined by those tools to just work with them, and just, they are supposed to help you. So if you feel like they're not helping you, then tweak them around. Make them work for you, not against you, not try to put you into a box, but you should be able to use them as a tool to create something. Again, think of it like if you do not have a composition idea or something, then just start playing Tetris, play those games, like try to fit them in together, see what shapes really combine really well. You'll find that out as you try it. The more you play around with it, the easier it will get. And again, to finalize a piece, usually in all the pieces that I create, I will actually use the grid builder in one form or the other. So even on pieces that I've used for Coca-Cola that have been displayed on Times Square, I've used the grid builder. And so it's usually in the whole process that I do, where you can see that from sketch. So here you see from sketch, you see already the grid builder in here placed inside, where I am writing it inside and then just placing it around to finalize it really well. And you see how well I try to stick right on the edges of the line, and where I know that it's kind of like bended, I try to go over it just a tiny little bit just to make sure that it looks really well. All right, guys, it's your turn to start creating, to start drawing. Make sure that you try it out. You can find all the links in the description. You'll find the timestamp there as well in a moment after this is online. And can't wait to see what you guys create. Don't forget to use the hashtag #DrawWithStefan or Grid life, I think, is the hashtag that we've been using for the grid builder, but you can just also use grid builder to share your pieces. And I can't wait to see. We are loving to see what you guys have been creating with them, and hopefully they help you to create even more, make it easier for you to create. And so I'm excited to see what you guys are creating, and I hope to see what you are doing very, very soon. What is left to say? Not much. Hope that you guys have a fantastic day and afternoon, and hope to see you very, very soon. So guys, see you on the next live stream. Bye.